The morning sun streamed through the old lace curtains, casting soft, golden patterns across the worn wooden floors. I stood in the kitchen of my beloved home, a small cottage I had spent years restoring with my own hands. Today was my 36th birthday, and though the celebration was modest, just family, a homemade vanilla cake, and a few simple decorations, it was everything I had hoped for. I arranged the plates carefully, smiling at the familiar creaks of the old house, each sound like a whispered memory from the past. One by one, my parents arrived, then my brother Ben, and finally Samantha, my cousin, always polished, always just a little too poised. The house buzzed with quiet laughter and gentle conversation. For a while, it felt like one of those perfect days I would remember forever. Then my mother, her hands trembling slightly, handed me a small envelope wrapped in shiny silver paper. "This one's special," she said with a tight smile. Touched, I untied the ribbon and slid my fingers under the foil, expecting a heartfelt letter, maybe an old family photo tucked inside. Instead, I pulled out a stack of neatly folded papers. My heart caught as I read the bold black letters. Eviction notice. The chatter around me faded into an unbearable silence. I looked up, searching their faces. My mother, my father, Ben, even Samantha. But none of them would meet my eyes. Samantha stepped forward, her voice smooth, almost rehearsed. "Ellie, it's time. The house is still under Aunt Linda and Uncle Mark's names. They've decided to sell. It's better for everyone." I felt the paper crumple in my hand as a heavy weight settled in my chest. On the very day I thought we were celebrating my life, my family had handed me an order to leave the only place that ever truly felt like home.
The room was so quiet I could hear the faint ticking of the old wall clock above the fireplace. I stood there, clutching the eviction notice in my trembling hands, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out everything else. I searched the faces of the people I had trusted my whole life, my parents, my brother Ben, my cousin Samantha, looking for some kind of explanation, some hint that this was all a mistake. But no one met my gaze. My mother wrung her hands nervously. My father stared down at the floor. Ben shifted uncomfortably, his mouth tight. Only Samantha looked at me directly, her expression calm, almost indifferent. "It's for the best, Ellie," she said, stepping forward with that practiced smile she always wore. "The neighborhood's booming. It's a smart move. Everyone agrees it's time to sell." Her words sliced through the thick air like a blade. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My chest felt hollow, as if the foundation beneath my feet was crumbling. This house, this place I had poured my soul into, was being stripped away with a smile and a business pitch. I looked at my mother again, silently pleading, but she just lowered her eyes, unable or unwilling to meet mine. I realized then that the decision had already been made, and I had been the last to know. The paper crumpled in my fist as a wave of heat flushed through me. Betrayal burned in my veins. "Get out," I said, my voice shaking but loud enough to cut through the heavy silence. My mother gasped softly. My father took a step back. Ben opened his mouth as if to protest, then thought better of it. Samantha, of course, didn't even flinch. "Ellie, don't be dramatic," she said smoothly, as if I were a stubborn child throwing a tantrum. "Out," I repeated, more forcefully this time. One by one, they moved toward the door, gathering coats and handbags without a word. No one looked back at me, no one apologized, no one even hesitated. Samantha was the last to leave. She paused in the doorway, giving me a look that was almost pitying. "You'll see," she said softly. "You'll thank us someday." Then she was gone. I stood there, the door clicking shut behind them, the sound echoing through the empty house like a gunshot. Alone. Utterly, devastatingly alone. I collapsed onto the old armchair by the front window, the eviction notice falling from my hand and fluttering onto the coffee table. For a long time I just sat there, staring blankly at the soft beams of sunlight filtering through the dusty lace curtains. Memories clung to every inch of this house. I could still see the gabled attic where I had spent endless summer evenings restoring the old rafters, sanding down the wooden beams until they shone with a soft golden hue. I could smell the lavender I had planted in neat rows in the backyard, the scent mingling with the warm earth after a gentle rain. The kitchen where I had burned my first loaf of bread, the staircase where I had once hung fairy lights for a Christmas that no one even came to celebrate. Every scratch, every nail, every paint stroke, they were mine. They were pieces of me, stitched into the very bones of this place, and now they were throwing it all away like it meant nothing. A tightness gripped my chest, so fierce I thought I might actually break apart. Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Crying would not fix this. It would not undo the betrayal. I wrapped my arms around myself as if I could somehow hold together the pieces that were coming undone inside me. In the empty house, I could still hear the faint echoes of laughter from this morning, a cruel reminder of how quickly joy could turn into sorrow. I wasn't just losing a house, I was losing a part of myself. The next morning, after a sleepless night spent staring at the cracks in the ceiling, I picked up my phone and texted Grace. "I need you. Bring your laptop. And if you still have the renovation files from last year, bring those too." Grace didn't ask questions. She never did when it mattered. Less than an hour later, she pulled up in her dusty blue pickup truck, her brown hair tied back in a no-nonsense bun. She stepped into the living room, took one look at my face, and hugged me tightly without a word. We sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor, piles of paperwork and faded blueprints spread between us. Grace pulled out her laptop and immediately began digging through her meticulously organized folders. "Every permit, every city inspection, every approval you ever filed, it's all here," she said, flashing a quick, determined smile. I let out a shaky breath. For the first time in 24 hours, a tiny flicker of hope stirred inside me. If they wanted a fight, they were about to get one. It didn't take long for the first crack in Samantha's story to appear. Grace, ever the detective, noticed something strange in the paperwork Samantha had shown to my parents, the so-called complaints from neighbours about my illegal renovations. She squinted at a scanned document on her laptop. "This name," she said, tapping the screen. "Jason Cleary. Supposedly filed a noise complaint against you?" I nodded. I didn't know any Jason Cleary on Willow Street. Grace's fingers flew across the keyboard. A few clicks later, she leaned back, frowning. "No Jason Cleary listed as a resident here. In fact, no record of anyone by that name owning property in this area." The more we dug, the worse it got. Permits Samantha claimed were missing were, in fact, filed correctly years ago. Inspection failures she accused me of? Fabricated. Even the supposed city citations were sloppily forged, riddled with formatting errors and signatures that didn't match official records. I stared at the screen, my heart thudding painfully. Samantha hadn't just taken advantage of my trust. She had built an entire web of lies to tear me out of my own home. And for a terrifying moment, it had almost worked. Later that afternoon, I met Ben at a small coffee shop on the edge of town. He looked exhausted, the dark circles under his eyes giving away the sleepless nights I guessed he'd been having too. He hesitated when he saw me, but eventually slid into the booth across from me. "Ben," I said quietly, "you knew about the eviction, didn't you?" He lowered his eyes, shame written all over his face. "Yeah. Samantha convinced Mum and Dad you'd messed up the renovations. She said there was a risk of fines, even lawsuits." I slid a thick folder across the table, the permits, the inspection records, the evidence Grace and I had compiled. "None of it's true," I said. "She lied to you. She lied to all of us." Ben flipped through the papers, his hands trembling slightly. The colour drained from his face the further he read. "Ellie," he whispered. I didn't know. I swear I thought—" "You thought I was reckless," I said, my voice hollow. "That I didn't know what I was doing." He shook his head violently. "No, I trusted Samantha. I thought she had everyone's best interest at heart." A bitter laugh escaped me. "She never cared about this house, Ben. She only cared about selling it to whoever would pay the most." Ben sat in silence for a long moment, then finally looked up, his eyes glassy. I'm sorry, Ellie. I was wrong. Tell me what you need. I'll help you. For the first time in days, a weight lifted off my shoulders. I wasn't alone anymore. That night, back at the house, I sat by the window sipping tea and staring into the darkened yard. The lavender garden lay cloaked in shadow, the wooden fence casting long, broken lines across the grass. I should have felt safe now that Ben and Grace were by my side. But deep inside, unease gnawed at me. As I got up to check the locks on the doors, I noticed something strange, a faint glimmer on the front porch. Cautiously, I stepped outside. Lying on the doormat was a plain manila envelope. No name, no return address. Hands trembling, I opened it. Inside were dozens of photographs, photos of the inside of my house, the kitchen, the stairwell, the attic window where I used to sit and read. Every room was marked with a red X. I gasped, my breath catching in my throat. Someone had been inside. I stumbled back, slamming the door shut, locking it tight. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore, it was a warning. They wanted me scared, they wanted me to give up. But as I stared at the photographs spread across the floor, something shifted inside me. Fear turned into anger, and anger sharpened into resolve. They had trespassed into my home, into my memories. Now I was going to trespass into their carefully laid plans and tear them apart, piece by piece. The next morning, sunlight spilled gently into the kitchen where Grace, Ben, and I gathered around the worn wooden table. It was the same table where, just days earlier, I had laughed over birthday cake. So naive to the betrayal taking root beneath my feet. Grace had come prepared, a determined look sharpening her usually kind features. She unfurled a notepad between us and powered up her laptop, her fingers flying across the keys as she pulled up the folders of evidence we'd collected. Ben sat quietly, still grappling with the guilt of having doubted me, but the way he leaned forward now told me he was ready to fight alongside me. We needed a plan, not just to defend myself, but to tear down the facade Samantha had so carefully constructed. I knew it wouldn't be enough to simply prove the documents were fake. Samantha and Derek had wrapped their lies too tightly around powerful investors, city officials, and even my own parents. We had to reveal the truth so publicly, so undeniably, that no one could look away. The opportunity was obvious. The engagement party. Samantha was planning an extravagant celebration to showcase her bright future. An evening filled with wealthy investors, friends of the Stone family, and city insiders. It was the perfect stage. If we revealed everything there, in front of everyone she sought approval from, her lies would unravel before she had a chance to spin new ones. Still, we needed stronger proof. Grace suggested we reach out to someone who might have insight into Derek's real estate dealings. And that's when I remembered Maya Stone, Derek's younger sister. Maya had always been a quiet presence at family events, overshadowed by her ambitious brother. But Grace managed to track her down through a mutual acquaintance, and by late afternoon we found ourselves at a quiet cafe tucked behind rows of oak trees.
Maya sat hunched over her tea, her fingers nervously tapping against the cup. But when she looked up at me, there was a determination there I hadn't expected. "I can't pretend I didn't know something was wrong," she said in a low voice. "I overheard them talking about the permits, about your house. I didn't know how deep it went until now." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small flash drive, sliding it across the table. "Emails, internal documents, and recordings," she whispered. "Samantha used my laptop once when she thought I wasn't paying attention. I saved everything." I stared at the drive, my fingers hovering over it. It felt almost too easy, this one tiny piece of plastic containing the weapons we needed. "Why are you helping me?" I asked quietly. Maya shrugged, a sad smile tugging at her lips. "Because truth matters, and because no one should lose their home to greed." Back at my house, as the sky darkened and a light breeze rustled the lavender outside, we plugged the flash drive into Grace's laptop. The files opened like a Pandora's box. There were detailed blueprints for the redevelopment project, including demolition orders already drafted, email chains where Samantha and Derek plotted how to manipulate my parents into selling under false pretenses, and most damning of all, a voice recording. We listened in stunned silence as Samantha's voice filled the room, cold and calculating. "We'll make it look like Ellie broke city code. Once the protections are stripped, we can buy the house for nothing." Derek's voice followed, smug and certain. "After the party, it'll be too late for her to fight back." I clenched my fist so tightly, my nails dug into my palms. Every word was another blow, but also another piece of the armor I was building around myself. We spent the next few hours compiling everything into a presentation simple enough that even Samantha's most loyal supporters couldn't deny it. Grace printed backup copies in case anything went wrong. Ben organized the evidence on several USB drives and even uploaded them to a secure cloud. No more chances, no more doubts. As I tucked one of the USB drives into my clutch, I caught my reflection in the window. There was no fear in my eyes now, only fire. Samantha thought she had buried me under lies. She was about to learn that I had been planting seeds the whole time. And tomorrow night, under the golden chandeliers of her perfect engagement party, those seeds would bloom into a reckoning she could never escape.
The Bellevue Grand Hotel shimmered like a jewel under the evening sky. Its towering windows glowed warm with candlelight, and laughter spilled from the ballroom doors where Samantha's engagement party was in full swing. The place oozed elegance, polished marble floors, gold-trimmed mirrors, the clink of champagne glasses in every corner. Everything was curated to perfection. I stood outside the grand entrance, invitation in hand, one that Maya had slipped me just days earlier. My heart beat steady, not with fear, but with purpose. Inside this building, they were celebrating a future built on lies, and I was about to set the truth free. The moment I stepped into the ballroom, the air shifted. Conversations paused for a fraction of a second as heads turned toward me. I caught Samantha's eye across the room. Her smile flickered. She hadn't expected me here. Dressed in silver and surrounded by admirers, she looked like the queen of her own kingdom. But I could see it, just beneath the surface, a shadow of doubt. I gave her a small smile and moved through the crowd, weaving between guests with polite nods, careful not to show my hand too soon. I found Grace and Ben near the side of the room. Grace met my eyes, gave the slightest nod, and slipped me the small black USB drive. It was time. Samantha soon stepped onto the stage, lifting her glass to address the crowd. Her voice was syrup smooth, every word rehearsed. She thanked everyone for being there, praised Derek's vision for the future, and spoke glowingly about legacy and ambition. That was my cue. I stepped forward just as the room fell quiet for the toast. My voice cut clean through the air. "Before we raise our glasses," I said, "there's something everyone here deserves to see." Gasps rippled across the room. Samantha turned toward me slowly, the smile frozen on her face. "Ellie," she said tightly, "this really isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," I replied, calm, clear, unshaken. I walked toward the AV table, plugged in the drive, and turned to the audience. "This concerns not just me, but every person who's invested in the Harper Stone project. The house at 197 Willow Street, my home, isn't just a property, it's a case study in deception." The screen behind me flickered to life. First came the blueprints for the luxury development, drawn up months ago, well before any official sale was even discussed. Then the forged documents, phony citations, fabricated neighbor complaints, falsified permits. Gasps turned into open outrage. People glanced towards Samantha and Derek, who stood rooted in place, pale and silent.
But I wasn't done. The final blow came in the form of audio. Samantha's voice, crisp and unmistakable, played loud and clear. "Let Ellie take the fall. Once the house is stripped of protections, we'll get it for next to nothing." Then Derek. "After the party, it'll all be locked in. She won't stand a chance." The silence that followed was thunderous. A man in the front row, Randall Morris, one of Derek's key investors, stood up slowly and turned to them. "Is this true?" he demanded. "Is this how you do business?" Samantha opened her mouth, but no words came out. That was when two plainclothes officers entered the room. They moved with quiet authority, flashing badges as they approached the stage. "Miss Samantha Gray, Mr. Derek Stone," one said. "We'd like to speak with you regarding an ongoing investigation into document fraud and property manipulation." The blood drained from Samantha's face. Derek stiffened. His usual composure cracked down the middle. As they were escorted out, Samantha turned her head and hissed at me through clenched teeth. "You'll regret this." But I only looked at her and said, "No, I'll remember this." When the doors closed behind them, the ballroom hung in a strange silence, and then, as if some unseen weight had lifted, the tension broke. Conversations resumed, hushed and incredulous. Some guests left, shaking their heads. Others approached Grace and me, asking for details, confirming what they saw. At the edge of the room, I saw my parents. They had arrived late, just in time to witness everything. My mother looked shell-shocked, her hand gripping my father's sleeve tightly. I hesitated, then walked toward them. "I didn't want to do this in public," I told them softly. "But I didn't have a choice." My father looked down, then back up at me with tired eyes. "You did what was right," he said quietly. My mother stepped forward and gently touched my hand. "We should have listened to you," she whispered. "We're so sorry, Ellie." I nodded, not out of triumph, but relief. Something broken had started to mend. Ben walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did it," he said simply. "No," I said, looking around the room that once held power over me. "The truth did." In the days after the party, the house was quieter than I'd ever known it. But it didn't feel empty. It felt calm, like something dark had been pushed out, and the walls were finally breathing again. Weeks passed. Spring crept into Willow Street with soft sunlight and the scent of lilacs from next door. My lavender garden bloomed early that year, as if it, too, had survived something. The city approved the petition to preserve the house as part of the Willow Street Historic District. A bronze plaque was mounted on the front gate. It read, "The Rickman House, a living legacy." I stood there for a long time the morning it was installed, running my fingers across the etched letters. This house had once been nearly lost to time, then nearly stolen by greed. Now it belonged not just to me, but to something greater. A memory, a history, a home. Grace stopped by almost every day, always with coffee in one hand and a project idea in the other. Ben brought his kids on weekends to help repaint the porch, the same one we'd sat on as children, chasing fireflies. Maya, too, came often. She had resigned from the company and joined a small preservation initiative, determined to restore, not destroy the beauty of forgotten neighborhoods. One morning, Derek showed up at the front gate. No suit, no arrogance, just a man who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He said he didn't expect it. But he wanted to support the preservation fund Maya had started. A quiet gesture, maybe even a genuine one. I accepted his offer, not because it erased what he'd done, but because healing meant letting go of what no longer had power over me. Samantha never reached out. Her name disappeared from family conversations like dust swept from a floor no one wanted to remember walking on. And that was fine by me. One rainy afternoon, my mother visited. She brought a small wooden comb she'd found in a box of my grandmother's things. "She used to say," my mother told me, placing the worn object in my hand, "that this house wasn't just wood and windows, it was the heart of the family." I didn't reply. I just opened the window next to us and let the rain-scented breeze fill the room. I could hear children laughing outside. I could smell fresh paint from the porch. I could feel everything: loss, fight, memory, and peace, all at once. Later that month, I hosted a small gathering. Nothing fancy, just string lights in the yard, home-cooked food, and the people who had stood with me when everything else fell apart. We ate under the cherry tree and shared quiet stories and loud laughter. Toward the end of the night, Ben raised a glass. To Ellie, he said, who didn't just save a house. She reminded us who we are when everything else is stripped away. I lifted my glass too, clinking softly with the others. Then I whispered, more to myself than anyone else, and to those who dare to come back stronger. Because I had, and I would never again doubt the kind of strength I carried, not just in my hands, but in my heart. This was my home, and finally, it felt whole again.